Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Star Wars Lads for a little bit of a surprise live stream tonight. We're talking about the stuff from the Game Awards this year. The Game Awards 2025 was a surprisingly good year for Star Wars. We got two trailers for some of the latest Star Wars releases. Obviously, the one everybody's talking about, and we did put out a full reaction to it. Star Wars Fate of the Old Republic, which is going to be our spiritual successor to Knights of the Old Republic. Can't wait to talk about that. But then shortly after, like almost right as we were finishing editing our trailer reaction for that one, we got Star Wars Galactic Racer, which dropped a trailer. So instead of doing a full reaction to that one as well, we decided let the Fate of the Jedi one or Fate of the Old Republic. I'm going to keep saying Fate of the Jedi. I've already almost typed it like 5 times doing tags and titles and stuff. We're going to let Fate of the Old Republic trailer reaction breathe and do a really our first news live post our change in format. As we said, if you guys didn't join us, a few weeks ago, we were trying to change the news lives to not just be once a week, but really be anytime big news came out. And so, this being easily the biggest Star Wars news in months, we wanted to experiment with the formula. So hopefully you guys are joining us tonight, enjoying the stream. It's not going to be a super long stream, but we're going to take your guys' questions, talk about our thoughts on these specific trailers and the Game Awards and just the future of video games in Star Wars. So make sure you send in your chats if you'd like to say something about either one of these. It is going to be first come, first serve as usual. All our typical rules first come, first serve. We take 2 questions per person before cycling back through. And then super chat will guarantee your chat on the stream tonight. And we're just going to kind of go for a little while and see how the chat flows. But hopefully, you guys are enjoying the stream and have some thoughts on this latest Star Wars news because man, I did not expect one, not one, but two big Star Wars announcements today. So let's talk about Fate of the Old Republic first. We did just talk about it again. If you haven't seen our trailer reaction, go check it out. That's where we watched it for the first time. That's where we dive a little bit more into individual sequences. And it really only has been about an hour and a half or so since we initially recorded it and then only about 30 minutes since we dropped it. So thoughts are still fresh on Fate of the Old Republic. Haven't really seen much that's changed, but overall, to reiterate what I said in the trailer reaction, I'm very excited for this. Always wary when it comes to a Star Wars game that has no release date. Always wary when it comes to a new announcement from Lucasfilm in general, because the track record, especially for film and video games, has been really bad with announcements to actually receiving the products that have been announced. Just see Star Wars Eclipse, see KotOR remake, but this one, with it being spearheaded by a game director, like they've put somebody's name on it and he's made it public, Casey Hudson. And for those of you who don't know, Casey Hudson is the original game director of Knights of the Old Republic. He also was involved in Baldur's Gate 2, Shadows of Am, Jade Empire, the Mass Effect trilogy, not the bad fourth one. And then most recently, he was involved with a lesser project in Anthem. But his track record overall has been incredibly stellar. He's one of the more impressive names in the video game industry, one of the more highly sought after video game industry names. And he really cut his teeth with Knights of the Old Republic. And he described this on Twitter as a spiritual sequel to Knights of the Old Republic, calling it a single player, narrative driven action RPG, spiritual successor to Knights of the Old Republic. Working on KotOR was the defining experience of his career. And this is a dream come true for him and his team of incredible storytellers at Arcanaut Studios, which is also a new studio. So we'll see how this all comes together. Tentatively, very excited. I mean, just to continue the Old Republic is going to be great. But Sonic, what were your thoughts on this trailer and just the announcement of Old Republic coming back?
Excited, to say the least, obviously, a lot of memories playing KotOR, even Star Wars: The Old Republic too for a good bit there. But, yeah, I mean, this being the opening trailer of the Game Awards kinda shocked me. I know there's some rumors the last day or 2, like, something with Old Republic will happen, and like I said on our trailer reaction, we'd been hearing too earlier in this week, like, so this is why a game was canceled with the Switch Port 2 release of the restored content mod for KOTOR 2 and all the lars and everything involved there. You can hear a little bit more of my thoughts there, but it seems like they were still working on those remakes, at least the KOTOR 1 remake and supposedly even a second one officially, and that might still happen. But this seems like them taking a big bold step into the Old Republic in what I still assume to be canon. I mean, I think right now, like just even looking through like the interview that they've been putting up online, he's like, yeah, this is based on my legacy. There's even some mentions of Star Wars: The Old Republic and the people who worked on that. So I also made a point like a lot of this trailer with the ship design really does feel strongly Star Wars: The Old Republic with how extremely like over design it can be at times, right? That's the one criticism I always had about KOTOR to Star Wars: The Old Republic. KOTOR, I can at least play it off as like, yeah, this is a long time ago. Star Wars: The Old Republic, I'm like, oh, this feels like the prequels happened just 3,000 years ago, right? So besides all that and what we could see in the wreckage and all, there's not really much to this trailer. But then obviously the derelict Sith dreadnought, right? Like that's the big selling point. That's going to be on everyone's thumbnails. That's what's going to get people super hyped for it. We don't know what exactly this Jedi character is looking at, what her companion species are, what that droid is. All of it looks pretty new, but as we know, Casey wants to make something definitive again. He's like, I want to make the contemplative version of what I did for KOTOR. So I'm hoping for that to be the case. He did mention though that this is like a studio that was just founded this year, and this is what they're working on right away. So awesome. I'm hoping that means that they've talked about it. They've been working on this ideas and the story and everything for a while, especially this being a narrative RPG. But anything more serious that we're gonna see out of this is probably, like, another year or 2 away max for, like, another cinematic and all that. This is gonna be a long process, but still excited. I'm excited that it's not just a straight up KOTOR remake that, people want it to be Legends, people want to be canon. You're ignoring that. You're kind of teasing between the 2 timelines. You're not even gonna do Star Wars: The Old Republic. The way he's talking about it, it seems like it's end of the Old Republic era, so closer to, like, a knight errant than anything else. That's cool. I'd love to be able to see, like, almost excavate through the Old Republic era. If there's a way for me personally as a Tales of the Jedi fan to see, like, that stuff be better implemented, maybe pushed back to be a little bit more ancient, yes, I would love to see stuff like that. I know KOTOR 1 sorta tried to do it, but it was, like, what, 30 years before that game? So it never really made a lot of sense in that way, but yeah, I'm excited from everything I've read from the interview. I'm looking forward to it, really. Not holding my breath until I see another, like, cinematic trailer from this because we got one for Eclipse, like, what, 5 years ago? We got one for KOTOR 4 years ago, the remake through Sony, like, this is fine, a great fun first step. I like that it does feel like it has some very specific direction to it, but it's a wait and see as always.
Yeah, exactly, and that's why although this is, blowing up the internet, blowing up the Star Wars world, it is something that we do have to be tentatively excited for as jaded Star Wars fans who have gone through this, especially because, I mean, we started our Star Wars show in 2021. And since then, we've just seen so many things come and go and never actually happen. So, this is tentative excitement. It is obviously also a very short trailer. It doesn't really show much at all and doesn't give us too many thoughts on what the world is. And I think generously, we're looking at 2027, 2028 as the absolute earliest that we would get this game. And that is really generous because I don't think this game's coming until maybe closer to 2030. But with the Star Wars pipeline, I don't know. Maybe they've accelerated things. We haven't seen too much from Star Wars video games. It is the 50th anniversary in 2027. We don't know of any games that are coming out. I think the one that you would guess is Jedi 3 for 2027. That would be the most logical guess. because of timeline, because of it being a big, already beloved IP. But this would be an awesome reveal. I just really don't buy that it's gonna be that soon. Also, the lack of a release year and then getting Galactic Racer right after is something that is, going to be obviously something you compare, right? You get Racer with a release date, and you don't get this with you get this with no release date. I think that's pretty obvious that this is a ways away, and the fact that it is a new studio, the fact that it is their first project, I mean, they're gonna wanna come out swinging, and you would hope, and I say this all the time with gaming because I've tracked the gaming world with release dates like this for 15 years or more. I've been really into gaming since I was, in 6th grade. And we've seen a lot of games that have gotten delayed for years and years and years and be amazing. So it's not necessarily like film where a delay or a multi-year delay is often a death nail for the film. Like, a lot of times when a movie's delayed for years, it's not going to be very good. When you see a video game delayed, oftentimes that's a sign of support. We've seen that change a little bit over the years with some of the bigger companies. Somebody like Ubisoft, sometimes their delays haven't really made the game any better. But I think back to classic examples like a BioShock Infinite, which I thought was fantastic, and that was delayed for years and years and years. Even Cyberpunk was delayed a long time, ultimately came out in a really unfinished state, but then when we, got the more finished game now, like 5 years later, it's a fantastic game. So, there are a lot of positives with this. I assume it will be something that they take their time with, but I'm very excited nonetheless. Let's see what some of you guys are saying in the chat. Tony Shark says Casey Hudson. Yes, that's the most exciting thing, and I think that's the thing that makes me think this is actually going to happen is having somebody with the prestige of Casey Hudson attached to a Star Wars game. Somebody putting their name on it is a lot better than just a studio being involved. Like we saw Quantic Dream with Eclipse. Okay, great. But they've had a lot of problems since then. Nobody knows if that's actually going to happen. And then some of the other Star Wars stuff like Aspire with KotOR remake, it's up in the air from what their track record is in the past with Star Wars games just mostly being remaster studio and now having to do an entire remake project. This is a lot more promising, even if it is a new studio. Just the fact that Casey Hudson's publicly talking about it, the fact that it's a public announcement, not a leak, all that is really positive for the fact that this is something that's truly in active development.
Yeah, I mean, it's you don't just add that name to that trailer for no reason. Like, you know what it's gonna elicit out of your audience. You don't have an interview basically right away with the trailer, right? We've seen trailers that have had like just some plush, but here he really talked about like the legacy of KOTOR and everything. So yeah, I mean, it as the first line says in the interview, it's the edge and a galaxy on the edge of rebirth after the old republic, right? So maybe this is even closer to Bane and all that. Like, this is a guy who has made the definitive centerpiece of the old republic timeline, but he's also seen a lot of that story be shaped around him with a lot of his colleagues, with an entirely different company, right, in Obsidian, right? And have its own strong reputation, very different reputation. So this is a great way for him to like not only just take that on, give his own spin on it, but also make something new, right? Like, there's a huge emphasis in interviews, like, we want to make original stories in this period where it's unburdened by a lot of the greater Star Wars narrative that has all these expectations, has all these generational divides and stuff. KOTOR, yes, it's probably gonna have its own. The Old Republic is probably gonna have its own for sure, but I don't think it'll be the same way as like when if you have like a movie that's been there for like 30 years, 50 years, right? This is gonna be like, hey, we're not gonna touch those games. We're gonna tell a story in that time period, have some reflections, have some nuance to it, space some things out for maybe a canon story, and then let the era flourish as it may moving forward. I think that's a great idea. I'm more confident in this because it does really seem like they're actually very cognizant of its history. They're very cognizant of expectations of KOTOR 3, of why Star Wars: The Old Republic is still pumping out like new material. Like, this is not like a dead period of Legends. This is the only active period of Legends. So people are still like very much tied to it. So they're like, why mess that up? Just take what makes sense, even it out for whatever canon this story this might be. and set up the pieces for someone else, like a showrunner or a movie director, to really take forward. So I'm confident in this a lot more than Eclipse. Eclipse was supposedly like High Republic, had some very cool visuals, some very different visuals, and then nothing, right? Like we just have seen zero updates on that. This fills me a lot more confidence.
Yeah, the only thing you can really say as a detraction from the whole thing, if you really wanna be negative about this, is the Amy Henning project that we got that didn't happen. That's the only other time we've had direct, you know, attachment from a major person within the video game space. We've obviously seen studios come and go, but that's the only time we've had that direct attachment from somebody in a major studio in the video game space and not had it happen. So we have a track record of this possibly falling through, but I still think overall Casey Hudson being attached is a massive plus for the believability of this whole thing. So, yeah, very excited that he's on on board, excuse me, for this project. HD GameTube TV says, I find Fate of the Old Republic more exciting than KotOR remake since it's the OG director who also worked on the Mass Effect trilogy. Yeah, very exciting, and his track record speaks for itself. Count Comics says, I really want to be excited for Fate of the Old Republic, but the idea of getting it in 2027 or around there pretty much deconfirms Eclipse and KotOR remake for me. I don't think so. I think if anything, this should maybe raise your expectations for KotOR. Eclipse, you should already be expecting that to never happen. It just doesn't seem like something that's prioritized. We haven't heard a single thing about it in 5 years. And it's just from a studio that's been struggling over the last few years. So pretty much all signs just point to that never happening. So I would say temper your expectations about Eclipse, expect that one to never happen, and then if it does, great. With KotOR remake, I think this is a step in the right direction because mainly because it's two different studios making it. So because it's two different studios, it's not a pivot. It's not a pivot for Aspire to this game from what was going to be KotOR remake. And if this is a big, exciting reintroduction back into Old Republic for everybody, for gamers at large, because we have to remember, as big as old Knights of the Old Republic is for our generation, as much as we all love it, as much as Star Wars fans love it, it's a 20-plus-year-old game. The second game came out 20 years ago. So it's not something that's necessarily in the forefront of gamers' minds today. And it is, frankly, fairly dated when it comes to game mechanics. So it's a difficult game for people to jump into unless they are committed to learning about it or interested in historical RPGs and all that. So I think it is worth it to try to jump back into the RPG space because Star Wars hasn't had a single player RPG since KotOR 2. So with jumping back into the single player RPG space, which is arguably the biggest space in gaming right now for single player games, if you're going to jump back into that space, might as well jump into it with something fresh that doesn't necessarily have the complete baggage, while also hinting at the past and trying to loosely connect things. And that's what I think they're going to do. It might disappoint a lot of us who are hoping for KotOR 3, but I think it's going to loosely connect to everything to where if they decide to make KotOR canon, if they decide to make KotOR remake canon, then you still have this fit in, but it's not gonna be so tied into the lore of Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2 that it's unable to become canon or unable to become Legends, to the point where and also to the point where it alienates new gamers who aren't familiar with 20-year-old plus lore, right? So, I think that's the bridge they have to cross, and we have to, expect this to be a return to an old experience, but frankly, a new experience altogether. But in saying that, Count Comics, KotOR remake, if this succeeds and people want to find out, hey, where did this whole world kind of originate? That's where KotOR remake can follow into 2028, 2029, or a year or two after whenever this comes out. And again, I think 2027 is optimistic for this game. But if that follows a couple of years later, then people are already back in this world, and you have a whole new generation of gamers who, have been born in the last 20 years now invested in the Old Republic.
Yeah, I echo a lot of the same thoughts. 2027, I think, no matter what belongs to Jedi 3. At this point, it's like, yeah, okay, the EA sale has already gone through. It's going to take some steps and a while to get to that final conclusion. It won't really affect that game. I think that's a nice place to leave it as like maybe the final crowning piece of Star Wars EA, which has had a mixed bag. Let's be fair and nice, honestly, about that. But it'll be at least a nice like last couple games for them. I think we can appreciate that from them. Like if Outlaws is your low point of your last couple years, or that, or Squadrons, I think you're doing better. But let's just ignore the first half of the EA partnership exclusivity where they basically did nothing for 10 years and the whole loot box controversy with Battlefront 2. But, once Jedi 3 is done, obviously this is what we were promised. We're going to get more and more games come out, right? I don't think the KotOR remix dead, right? Like Liam said, it's I find it really hard to believe that with all the little leaks that we got this week and with what we talked about on our news stream a couple days ago, Saber Interactive still on their Madhead game subsidiary websites is like, oh, we have this big AAA game coming out in like a franchise that people have so much love for and all that. And everything in the documents kind of lines it up to being a KOTOR 1 remake or KOTOR 2 remake. And they've been working on that according to their roadmap up to this year. So things might have obviously changed and been stalled, sure. But for this to be leaked out in such detail, we don't really see a glimpse of that in the gaming industry. So I don't think it's dead per se. I think this now becomes the priority, right? You don't want to get to some weird streams of confusion. Like, you know, even in early Disney where people were like, "Oh, is Rogue One a sequel to The Force Awakens?" Right? Like people get confused. Frankly, the general audiences do. It's just a fact. I'm hoping gamers are a little bit better, but I think we'll still be seeing it. This is a game that's still, like Liam said, not 27. It might be 28, 29. It's a studio that just started. So why not at least inform people like, hey, this is like the world that this was in, right? Like this is what these features are. This is what the storylines were. These are the main players, and then let fate actually be a reflection of like, does that make sense? Is that true? Has it been obscured? If this is really at the edge, at the very end of the old Republic era, it pushes us also into like possibly finally having some live action styled or animated styled interactions with Darth Bane and all that story, which is quite literally written towards the end of the book, says like it's forgotten, it's obscured. We don't know what happens to Jenna. We don't really know if Bane is truly alive through her or not, right? There's all these questions that are there too. So I'm very curious about like if it is that Force user that we see in this game, or if it's going to be something totally different by the time we get to the game. If that's going to be some up character that's really like almost historian, almost trying to catch up on all this stuff, trying to pick up on all these different things, and like we were talking about on our reaction, and like some people are saying in the comments, the Sith Dreadnought being like a very much alien-esque derelict, right? That's intentional. They want us to make us feel like you're uncovering ancient history with booby traps and stuff like that you don't really know about. So very excited for it. I think KOTOR remakes will probably at least one will come out before two. I'm not so sure, but the problem is hey, the port didn't happen, but when we do our remake, it'll have all the restored stuff there. I'd love for that to be like 2026, 2027, and then 2028, you get your Fated Jedi, or 29, whatever it might be. Eclipse, I think, is done for. I think the time to jump onto the High Republic era was last year at the latest, probably closer to 22, 23. People who were around for the High Republic era were like, hey, Acolyte's going to be connected to this. There could be some like interesting centerpiece to like bridge in between Acolyte and the Old Republic, the High Republic initiative. That didn't happen. So unfortunate, really. It kind of sucks that we're having conversations about Eclipse with zero information, zero steps forward. And like Liam said, the company has been through a lot. They've got a uh, controversial CEO to say the least, right? So we'll see. I don't really have a lot of hope for it. But then again, maybe they are super far along. We didn't know anything really about this fate of the Old Republic till like maybe yesterday, and now they're saying like a whole studio dedicated to working on this and stuff like that. So yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the idea of Galactic Racer being a game that possibly comes out next year, the one it was announced to come out next year, indicates that there are a lot of things that we don't know about that they are working on behind the scenes. I mean, obviously, but in today's world with so many leaks, oftentimes you hear about things way before they're officially announced. That was one that we didn't really hear about, including the fact that we were all pretty disappointed by the reception to Beyond Victory. And it seems like anybody who played Beyond Victory, the VR game that was announced as like a racing game and everybody was excited, and then it didn't really have very many racing elements. Um, the fact that that was such a disappointment, and yet in that same space, it was not leaked that Galactic Racer was coming, I think speaks to the fact that the Lucasfilm Games seems to have a pretty tight ship over there when it comes to Star Wars games. This could be very far along. I would be shocked if it's 2027 just because we that's just not the timeline of video games these days. But you could also argue that Jedi 3 doesn't have a trailer out yet. And so if Jedi 3 doesn't get its trailer till next year, who's to say that that's farther along? It's just the fact that they already have, their team from Jedi 1 and 2 ready to work on Jedi 3. And I'm sure they had greenlit a sequel to Jedi Survivor prior to it even coming out. So it's just the behind the scenes stuff points more to Jedi, but you never know. We're going to take a few more questions about Fate of the Old Republic, and then we'll talk about Galactic Racer too, because we wanted to talk about that one also. But yeah, keep firing in your chats, and we will get to as many as we can. Critical Thinker says, since you split your news and Q&A streams, is this only for one on topic questions? Yes, we are only talking about these specific topics tonight. And for those of you who aren't aware, maybe just finding us for the first time, we do live Q&A with all of our fans every Tuesday night. So if you're interested in joining us to talk about anything you want, it could be these games, could be other things, make sure you join us on Tuesday nights. We do go live every single week. Batasai says, hey guys, good to see you. What's your take on the AI deal? We'll talk about that in a little bit later of this stream, or maybe next week. We're going to focus mostly on the video games tonight, but that is a big story to discuss. So we'll hold your question up for a little bit later. Critical Thinker says, what do you guys think the canonicity of the game will be? Are they just going to leave it vague, say it's definitely canon, or port it into the EU like Star Wars The Old Republic expansions and Son of Dathomir? I'm of the opinion that they're going to leave it vague, but point towards that it's canon. But I think in general, the amount of references and the stuff that's going to connect to Knights of the Old Republic will more so leave those games vague on whether they're canon now or not. Because I think the remake doesn't have to do the exact same game as the original. Obviously, the story will be pretty close, but there could be a few things in there they throw in the dialogue options to change up the canon as well. On top of the fact that RPGs in general, if it's going to be a choice-based RPG system like the first two were, there's overall a specific canon story, and most of what you do in the game isn't canon anyways. And that was with the original two games as well, right? So there will be a canon version of the story no matter what, and then everything else will be up to the player's choice. So I think they're going to kind of leave it vague, more so on the larger Old Republic, but I would imagine this is canon. I don't really see them doing a game that's Legends definitively in today's world unless it's a remake, because it just doesn't really make much sense. I would be excited if they did, because that would mean a possibility of them opening back up that timeline and doing the two timeline approach. But we just haven't seen them open up that timeline at all for anything except for Star Wars The Old Republic, which has already existed before the split and never shut down, right? So it wasn't something they restarted, it was just something they continued. They had all the opportunity in the world to like make Visions Legends or something if they didn't want it in canon, or make some of these other alternate takes, Elseworlds takes Legends if they wanted to, but they've turned them into this, Infinity style storytelling. So I don't really anticipate this being Legends whatsoever unless they fully decide to reopen Legends with a KotOR remake. And even if KotOR Remake 1 and 2 are Legends, which I expect them to be, it doesn't mean Legends is coming back. They're just remakes of games we've already had. So that's my thought in general on that. But I think this one will be vague enough within the timeline of those games to where if they wanted to make those remakes canon and just say basically everything up and to and through Bane is now canon, they could do that. And really, there's not much that detracts from that. There's a few little date errors with Bane Legends versus Bane Canon, but you could chalk that up to miscommunication or misinformation by the Sith or something. There's really nothing that's holding them back from just saying everything up to Bane is now canon.
Yeah, definitely agree on all those points. I know you're bringing up critical thinker about the failed transfer, right? Yeah, that's true, right? Like that's what he said on a blog post, but it's just a blog post, right? It's not on print. It's not something that they have to necessarily stick with, and that could be something that maybe some Jedi or someone finds out and becomes misinformed about it. Like, oh, like it was totally good, like a failure, and Janna, was killed off by somebody else or stuff like that. Like, I don't think we're dealing with Darth Bane and stuff. I'm just saying that's close. What seems like the timeline is hinting at being closer towards, as opposed to a Kotor. But yeah, I think these things will be vague, just because why restrict yourself when you can make a really great game? They were talking about the whole point of the legacy of KotOR, like how many stories have branched out of it, how you want to make something completely original. And that to me also signifies like, yeah, you want to make something original with the maximum flexibility, right? So why wouldn't you want to make this flexible to fit into both? And there isn't really too many stories that besides between KotOR 1, 2, and like the Revan book that you have to be like super considerate about the timeline. Like even some of the old historian stories or videos that they promos that they did of like earlier eras leading up to Star Wars: The Old Republic. Some of those details are not 100% accurate. They're a little obscured. So yeah, I'm of the opinion that it can stay. It'll be vague. It'll stay vague. I think we'll be good there. But canon probably just so that way someone else who wants to pick it up in like a different medium actually has something to be like, oh, maybe there's a character I want this to lead into, or I want to make something a little bit more definitive about what like the remnants that this person discovered, this force user.
HD Game Tube TV says, I feel like the Old Republic is the perfect era for an RPG because it's hard to make something like that in another era if you want to have meaningful story decisions and outcomes. Yeah, I think so. And I mean, that's why the Old Republic in general is such a gigantic time period in terms of its timeline. Like, people don't realize that Star Wars The Old Republic MMORPG takes place 1,000 years plus after Knights of the Old Republic, which also takes place after Tales of the Jedi, which is in the same timeline as well. So the Old Republic in general is like a 4,000, 5,000 year period. And there's even parts ahead of KOTOR that are technically considered Old Republic that we don't even know about, right? So there's so much in that time period. And part of it is just the fact that they wanted to give the creators room to tell stories that were expansive and exciting without limiting you to the confines of the Star Wars world. So I'm with you, HD. I think putting it in any other time period, unless you go far future, like way past like a legacy-esque time period, way past the events of the Rise of Skywalker, if you want to do it canon, or way past the events of Crucible, or even way past the events of Legacy if it was Legends, those are really the only areas that make sense. Just with the power scaling alone from the Old Republic era, that's why I think that era is the best place for RPG, because you can have these power fantasy characters and it doesn't feel that bombastic because of all the other characters that exist at that time. So I think that's why it's the most interesting era.
I mean, I agree. There's nothing about the Old Republic that wasn't appealing to me, even when I didn't like stuff like the Revenchists and all that in the Old Republic. They were still engaging with stuff. They were engaging with stuff that was way in the future and bringing it a little bit earlier, like Alderaan and the Killiks and stuff like that. So I love that era for all those reasons. But yeah, I mean, this is a game set at the end of the Old Republic. We'll see what they really want to do. See how much they're really willing to push their protagonists and characters and shit. But we'll see. I don't know. I think we're reaching into the point of the conversation where it's like we're trying to discuss our theories and the foundations of our theories. Like, frankly, guys, we got like 50 seconds of real footage. There's only so much we're gonna get. This was just an idea to like maybe even hire people. So yeah, that's crazy, but we'll see. I love the hype for it. Don't get me wrong. I just don't know how much more we can like dive directly into what we saw because it's not like we saw even the force user use any power to even make a judgment about like is the power scaling even the same. I hope so. I hope so because like that's always a fun part about the old republic that these are basically like demigods, like kind of walking around in terms of abilities at the peak of their fighting because they're constantly fighting. But I don't. There's only so much we can get out of this other than just diving into the nitty gritty of the hype.
And that brings up a good question, which I'm going to circle back to Count Comics here. Asks, do we even know if it's confirmed to be set in the Old Republic? The name Fate of the Old Republic. S- Uh, so it could be, like you said, them uncovering past lore rather than taking place in it. And that's a good point. Honestly, I mean, outside of the fact that it's the guy who worked on Knights of the Old Republic and the fact that he's saying it's a spiritual sequel to Knights of the Old Republic, nothing in the trailer specifically screams that, yes, this is Old Republic only, and there's no way it can take place in any other time period. Obviously, it's showing stuff that we've seen in the Old Republic, and that's another thing that makes you think that it's in that time period. And like we were just kind of talking about with HD, the idea of putting an RPG like this in any other time period, I mean, granted, it could be, early thousand-year gap between Bane and Phantom Menace. It could be an immediately post Bane game, but that kind of kills a lot of what the Old Republic title, references, right? Because when you're doing Old Republic, you're expecting armies of Sith, you're expecting armies of Jedi, you're expecting the ability to choose between light and dark. So that's a good point you bring up, Count Comics, but I would say I still firmly believe this is set in the Old Republic just because I think it would disappoint a lot of people if you go through the game and you can't become a Sith technically because there are no Sith in that thousand-year gap that the Jedi know about. So either you don't get involved with the Jedi or you can't become a Sith, or people would be disappointed if there's no Sith armies or dark Jedi to fight like you see in those other games. I think there's just a lot of iconography that people will be expecting with anything using the Old Republic in the title. But it's a fair question to ask. And it's something we did actually bring up in our reaction as well, because there's nothing that fully indicates that it is going to be, 5 years after KotOR 2 or even 10 years after KotOR 2. It could be 500 years after KotOR 2 and still be before Star Wars The Old Republic, right? So there's a lot of room to play with. The Old Republic is just such a massive time that when we when we look at the timeline of Star Wars, the main continuity, right? If you look at Phantom Menace 32 BBY through Rise of Skywalker 35 ABY, it's like 60 years worth of time. In the Old Republic, we've got 1,000 years in between Knights of the Old Republic 2 and Star Wars The Old Republic. That's significantly more time than we usually deal with Star Wars. So there's worlds of possibilities for things that can happen in this type of story frame, even if it isn't directly connected to KotOR.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think I could put it better than that.
Then after that, we have Critical Thinker will go back up to you. Says, is there anything significant from these KotOR era games that they'd have to change to fit canon, or would they probably feel mostly the same? Like, would Fate of the Old Republic and Knights of the Old Republic feel super different? It's kind of up to the game director, honestly. I mean, like I said earlier, they can just put this stuff into canon. There's nothing in canon that contradicts anything from Old Republic because we have 0 Old Republic stories. Even some of the stuff that references Old Republic, like, none of it's important. None of it's something that you couldn't just brush away as something that was misleading information or a Lie of the Sith or something like that. And even on top of that, something like the Dark Legends stories, which to me are one of the few things that they're in that kind of era that's different from KOTOR and Star Wars: The Old Republic. Those are legends. They're not even confirmed to be true Sith history, right? So there's a lot of wiggle room. So I think they could honestly just port it all. What I've said for years is that all the way back into like my Darth Bane, how to adapt Darth Bane in canon video from 2021 or 2022, was that the best way to do this would be some type of condensed formula because again, people do get confused, think that all this stuff goes together and it really doesn't. There's so much time in between everything. I mean, again, I talked about the gap between Knights of the Old Republic and Star Wars: The Old Republic, but the gap between Star Wars: The Old Republic and Darth Bane is like over 2,000 years. So it's this gigantic era. Like I don't think people truly comprehend how big that era is. And so condensing it into more of a 500 to 1,000 year era would make a lot more sense. A lot of people obviously will have problem with that, but if you wanted to tell one grandiose story, it'd make a little bit more sense. The thing that doesn't make sense is Tales of the Jedi being, only a couple decades before the the Knights of the Old Republic, which is visually incredibly different, right? So that's the strangest one. But they wouldn't have to do much. And I think if the game director wanted to make this truly a spiritual sequel, which is what he's saying it is, to KOTOR, I would imagine he'd want to keep the vibe that they had in KOTOR and make it as similar as possible.
I Yes. I think at the end of the day, like, we don't wanna touch anything else that's in the Old Republic, not even the comics that came out that are supposed to be the bridge between Tales of the Jedi and the KOTOR. Definitely not Star Wars: The Old Republic, even though I still do think a lot of what we've seen in this Fate of the Jedi trailer, design-wise with the ship, feels more Star Wars: The Old Republic than KOTOR to me. It just feels very, what are those words? Agreeables that they put on, like, all the ships? It just feels like a very over-designed a little bit just on the wings and stuff. Why wouldn't you go to the KOTOR vibe and feeling? That's still at the end of the day what people are looking for. That's what people were making literally like, I remember back as a kid, the way I actually got into KOTOR was not because of the game, it's because people on YouTube were putting up their versions of KOTOR through Lego of, like, the cutscenes that they were making, right? And it's like, yeah, I mean, it's something that captured people's full imagination, the visuals of it felt right, the weight of the world felt right, the expansiveness, like, you go away from that, you make something different. And I think no matter what, like we're seeing with like Halo and stuff, right? As they're making another remake of the original game with Campaign Evolved, there's people already complaining about like how the Forerunner tech looks like, it just doesn't look weird, worn down, and eerie anymore. It looks a little too shiny and stuff like looks like any game on the Unity engine, right? So that is another big thing. Like, how are you translating it while not almost like subconsciously having a lot of like what has come out of the KOTOR spin-offs, KOTOR sequels, and everything about that has now, in a lot of ways, kind of become more defining for some people who've stuck around with the Old Republic era. So that's gonna be a tough thing to see how it plays out. I think they're trying to go to the root of it, but again, going back to that interview, original stories to me still really emphasizes maximum flexibility, right? You wanna stick with KOTOR, but if it doesn't serve what the story is really trying to achieve and bring out visually, character-wise, power-wise, whatever it may be, I don't think it really matters much, especially because, like we were talking about at the start here, this does feel canon leaning. But yeah, stick with KOTOR. Why would you go anywhere different?
Well, I want to take a break real quick to ask you guys if you'd like the stream as well. We have more people watching right now than have liked, so make sure you do that. It really does help us out. And make sure you join us every week for our Tuesday live Q&As. Back to the chat, and we're a couple more here on KOTOR, and then we're going to get to Galactic Racer, and then we'll circle back around if you guys have any last few questions on KOTOR or FOTOR or whatever we're calling this one now. Um, Critical Thinker says, I don't trust that anything will come out until it does at this point, given their track record with films and even in games like Eclipse. They are really having a problem with announcing things prematurely, more just there are big contradictions in KOTOR between canon that the game will be forced to concede rather than like a creative choice. I haven't played KotOR, so I don't know. And then it goes back to Brandon, who says, was not expecting that announcement, but looks cool. We still got to wait for Eclipse game, which was announced several years ago. So to that point, Brandon, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, and I know we talked about Eclipse many times on streams you've been on too. I don't think Eclipse is coming out. I would again, like I told Sai at the beginning of the stream, expect no Eclipse, and then you're excited if Eclipse actually does happen. But that one's not happening for a long, long time. So don't expect Eclipse. And then as for Critical Thinker, again, they don't have to change really anything in canon for KotOR to work. So I don't see really any way in which they have to concede anything. But I am with you that I don't trust anything that doesn't have a release date to come out because of the Amy Henning project. To be fair to them, the Amy Henning project was never officially announced. It was something that was leaked. It was something that was rumored for years and years and years, but it was never something that they were like, yes, we are working on this project and it is coming out on this date and this is what it's going to be. It was mostly all, leaks and news that was reporting the Amy Henning project, to be fair to Lucasfilm. But with that as an example, we can't fully expect anything to come out from them. Their track record has been a lot better with announcements to release in the Lucasfilm Games era since they've decided to create a full subsidiary of the company to focus on video games. And I think that is a lot more promising overall because obviously they care about gaming rather than originally when Disney took over and they dissolved LucasArts. It just was kind of a side project. Now it's something that they obviously know they have a passionate fan base for, they can succeed in, everybody wants it, and so they've created a subsidiary. But I'm in between. I think you and somebody like Brandon, who's still hoping that Eclipse is coming. Like I don't believe that everything they announce will come, but I have a lot more confidence in the last few years on the video game side than I did prior. But I will still be hesitant for this one until we get a full second trailer or a gameplay trailer or even just a year that this might come out. And then Count Comics also says we have a better chance of getting 1313 than Eclipse. I would say you have a better chance of getting 1313 than Eclipse because that game was close to being done. Eclipse, I don't think has ever been started. But yeah, the odds are not high on either of those.
Yeah, be optimistic where you want to be, or don't. Right? Where we can only say what we can believe in. Um, but like we discussed, breaking down everything with Fate of the Old Republic in this news live and in our trailer reaction, we have reasons of being optimistic, right? Not like we're definitively tied down to it, but we're still always tempering it. Need to see something again. Like this is just one piece. What's the next piece? The next piece is what will get us started up again, right? And again, the Amy Henning one is a great example. We got a lot of things out of it. We got a lot of things out of 1313, and then didn't happen. But I'd rather live in a world where we're getting that instead of just being stuck with at the starting line with Eclipse and knowing that nothing about that was even visually a lock. Versus this, I'm like, at least there are things that I know are a lock because if we're actually dealing with the Old Republic, we need to keep the KotOR look as much as possible. So yeah, that's how I look at it.
Let's talk about Galactic Racer too, because that's something that I know most of you are excited for FOTOR, but Galactic Racer is honestly something I'm very excited for. As somebody who grew up with Racer and Racer Revenge, this is what I've been wanting for 20 plus years. And it was exciting to hear Beyond Victory was coming out. I don't have whatever they're calling it now, Oculus 3, MetaQuest 3, whatever it is called. I don't have one of those. I had the second one. And I like VR games, but they are something that I have a hard time playing for more than about an hour at a time, hour and a half at a time. It's hard to really lock in. And when Beyond Victory came out and they were just kind of secretive with it. They didn't show much of it. The trailer didn't look very good, and then the reviews were not good for it. And it just didn't look very fun. And the racing element was all like a top down in your house AR type of thing. just not for me, and it doesn't seem like it's really for anybody. But now Galactic Racer is coming out, and this looks like our true spiritual sequel to Racer Revenge. And I think honestly, more likely it's a Starfighter evolution from what we got to like the Rogue Squadron games, and that it's going to be, I would assume, a little bit more realistic, a little bit more modern, a little bit less arcade fun than maybe Racer was, which personally for me is I love the old school, arcadey designs. I love the fact that it doesn't feel realistic. I love the fact that you can kind of weave in and out of other pods and just create that like high octane, high speed F-Zero esque experience, which is what they really went for with Racer. I would imagine this is a little bit more Gran Turismo Forza than F-Zero. But if it's not, I would be pleasantly surprised. Either way, I'm excited. I'm a fan of Forza. I haven't played Gran Turismo in a long time, but I've played a lot of the last few Forzas. And if they were somehow able to turn this into like a Horizons-esque game, that would be awesome. I don't think so. I think it's be a little bit more like traditional Gran Turismo or Forza. But I'm super excited for this. I think it'll be a fun thing to play with a bunch of people. If it does turn out to be a little bit more arcadey, a little bit more fun, it could be a great multiplayer experience. It could be, a riff on classic arcade racers, sci-fi arcade racers. So whatever this is, it's awesome. Sebulba's in it. It looks great. I just can't believe we're getting this next year. It's just a shock, and I think this one is really we can actually be super hyped for this one, even if the audience is not quite as big as Fate of the Old Republic.
Yeah, I mean, I know we got a little bit more information in interview, like the lead racer with the mask is gonna be called Shade. I guess that's gonna be the person you're gonna step into. Naming someone that implies to me that there's gonna be some sort of campaign mode. I know there was a story to Beyond Victory with like Sebulba's protege or whatever that he takes on, and then having him here, I'm like, are we making connections? Are we gonna see that character? I don't think that's the same character from Beyond Victory. Just being on Jakku seems to indicate to me it's gonna be post Rise of Skywalker, if anything, because I don't remember Jakku having this much activity for sure. But I don't think it ultimately matters. It's just a racing game. But I am pretty hyped, right? I think this is a chance to have campaign be cross-platform. There's gonna be a lot of different land speeders, skim speeders, skiffs, everything. But then we haven't seen a single pod racer, right? And that's the thing. Like, are we not gonna do that? Is that what Beyond Victory ripped away from us because they made it so exclusive to that? That would be horrible. I doubt that's gonna stick permanently, especially with how Beyond Victory, even during its marketing, just shifted to being like, "This is a playset thing. Put your stormtrooper on a shelf and look at it while you're wearing your VR goggles." It's like, okay, they had zero confidence even in that product, right? So I'm hoping that means that we are gonna get pod racing. I'm hoping the Saboba little look there is just to be like, this is gonna be part of the story. You have to almost like unlock it while everything else might be there immediately. I think with this sort of game, you have to make it cross-platform. You have to make it like a free-to-play freemium game where you can buy skins and stuff like that. And I want it to be like, an old school game, like a racer. I just don't believe that exists anymore. I think you need to get the maximum audience, and unfortunately, that means playing a lot of microtransactions and stuff like that. But I am excited from what I'm seeing. I think this will be a fun game. I don't actually if this is a paid game, I think it'll be priced closer to a Squadrons than it would be a full, price game like a Jedi Theory or something, right? So, very very curious, very, very curious, but I'm excited. 2026, that's literally days away at this point, so hopefully we start hearing stuff again in, like, February or March.
Yeah, I hope so. And I think this specific game is going to I would be shocked if it's going to be a free to play. Like I would be really surprised and honestly pretty disappointed because I think that's just that type of game in today's world. And I know there's a lot of big fans of it. I'm just not one of them. I'm not somebody who likes those types of games. So I want this to be more of a traditional racing game with customization features and like HD Game Tube says and Count Comics, racer customizations is something we really have never seen in a Star Wars racing game before. We could choose our character before. I would imagine this is going to be a little bit more RPG-esque, where you create a character, you give them whatever attributes, but honestly, you're probably never going to really see their faces outside of cutscenes. So you give them some attributes, but it's your pod and the different parts you can collect and all that type of stuff. That's really the heavy gameplay element. If it is a true single player game, that would be kind of the target. Like I mentioned earlier with Forza Horizons, I mean, that would be like gold standard benchmark of what this could be. But if it is something like that with that type of game, it's an open world racing game. You can do street races, you can do mud races, you can do uh, off roading, you can do motorcycle races, you can do these time trials and like obstacle courses. You can do you have to find certain garages in the middle of nowhere that have old parts that you can put together different cars and classic cars and stuff like that. If you could do something like that with Galactic Racer, I mean that is on another level of what we've ever seen in a Star Wars racing game, to be able to fully customize not just your color, not just your design, not just all of that, but if you could truly, like, from the ground up, be a kind of mechanic and build your own pod from just the engine up, that would be pretty sick. And so I would hope that those features are in this. The other example is that if it is the free to play, then it's gonna be pretty bare bones. You're gonna have to pay for pretty much all customization. Most of it will probably be cosmetic, and it will be more of an arcadey style race with your friends and race against other people thing. And I'm really hoping it's not that. That didn't even cross my mind until you said it, but and that would be the massive. I would not want that. I mean, maybe it would be good. We have seen a lot of those be good in the past, not with racing really, but recently we've gotten better free to play games. I don't know. I want this to be a true traditional evolution of Racer and turned into something that makes Nintendo fans as well go, "Where is our new F-Zero? We've been waiting 25 years for that too." Like this could be something that really takes it to that next level.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be the cynic here, like, I'm usually not, but, uh, I'm just I'm just expecting that with something this short of a turnaround from announcement, right? And them being like, "Yeah, it's coming out next year." I'm like, "Oh, snap." Like, especially in a year as heavy and, like, impacted in schedule. Like, we just had news today about, like, the Darth Maul Shadow Lord series getting a prequel comic of sorts that's supposed to come out in March, but it might be, like, later. Like, like, what does that mean for that timeline, right? Like, I'm not really sure what the timeline is for the release of this either. So, that's why I'm a little cynical. I'm like, this would be great if we had everything firing on every week someone has some huge thing to talk about Star Wars that has its own fandom grow out of it and has legs and all that. That's just something that hasn't happened since LucasArts and Lucas Games was a thing, and its peak of the early 2000s. That's 20 years, and now we have way more developers and everybody else that have adapted to a climate in the industry that is a little bit more like cut corners, padded out in DLC, freemium enhancements, stuff like that. So it sucks. I want it to be great. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, we still have, as harsh as the developers as Nintendo can sometimes be, or distributors like Nintendo can be, they'll still deliver like a Smash Ultimate to you. They'll still deliver great games. I just haven't seen like that knockout Star Wars game other than the Jedi single player games for me to be confident in like a whole different style. Even Battlefront 2 took a long time to really get into that form. So I'll be optimistic in the sense that I think we can only go up. I think we have been progressing up and raising the floor. Have we raised the ceiling yet on our modern Star Wars games? Other than single player RPGs, I don't know. But yeah, if we get something closer to a Forza, an FC, or whatever it may be, yeah, I think that'll be a dub. I don't want this to just die off like how a Squadrons did, which was so well technically, but and a nice price point, but just didn't really have support. And this feels like a game that could either be kept alive for a long time because of freemium, or it's gonna be like that, have a good 1 month of fun, and then people forget about it. And that's where my worry lies about getting into that like high quality format.
I agree with you purely because of the turnaround time if they haven't been working on this for a while. But I think Squadrons was a game that felt like an addendum to Battlefront. It never felt like they put much into it. Yes, there was a multiplayer element, but it was something that didn't have anything outside of its kind of bare bones campaign. It had a nice 8 to 10-hour campaign, and then after that, there was nothing to do if you didn't play multiplayer. So that's where the customization features with this, like time trials, all that type of stuff, it could be something that, yes, turns into something that's more multiplayer based. Like you won't play it as much unless you have somebody in the same room as you or you have a friend online you can play with. But if you do enough with customization features, you can create an expansive post game to where people will want to keep playing. And especially if you have a multiplayer esque, like basically got to redo everything you did in single player, but in multiplayer to unlock all those features to boost your racer. I think all of those types of things could keep player bases engaged for a while. I imagine too with this, like if it is more of the squadrons realm, it would make sense because we have 2 games coming out next year, right? So, it'd be one of the first years in a long time we'd have 2 Star Wars games in the same year. And what was the other one? Zero Company, right, is the other game that we're getting, and that's another swing for Star Wars, like, we haven't seen them make a tactics game ever, and they've got that and a racing game in the same year, not necessarily both AAA types of genres. So I think if Zero Companies are early in the year release and this is our later in the year release, it bodes a little bit better for this maybe being something that's bigger than it could possibly be on paper. But we'll see. I mean, I really am hoping that we get a true successor to Racer. And I think using that name to me kind of screams that. They also showed like footage, actual game footage in the trailer. Like we don't have too much gameplay, but you have the first person racing footage. And it looks pretty darn good for something that if it were to be a free to play, I think this would be a pretty nice looking free to play. So I don't know. I'm pretty confident. The one thing with it too is you don't really see pod racers though. That's the other thing that's weird. There's no pod racing. It's a speeder game, which again, I mentioned F-Zero a bunch of times, makes it look a little bit more F-Zero-esque than originally a racer. But yeah, there's no pod racers in the trailer, which is something I didn't really pay attention to the first time around. It's all speeders and it's all either skims, land speeders, all that type of stuff. But it looks that changes it a little bit. So that would be hopefully maybe there's a pod racing mechanic in it at some point. Back to some of the comments. Count Comics says Galactic Racer needs to be crossplay for it to be really successful. Uh, I hope that there's a lot of pod racing customizations. Yeah, I hope so too. Again, didn't see any pod race racers in the trailer. Just kind of noticed that when I was skimming through it again. But you will be able to customize your own racer, I would assume. And then HD Game Tube TV says watch them find a way to put in a Darth Vader cameo in the ending of this game. Yeah, that would be it would be so classic, like 2000s game if you played the game, beat the story mode on hard difficulty or something, and you unlocked Darth Vader and Darth Vader's speeder as like a playable character. That would be awesome. I would love that. We don't have unlockables anymore in today's games. I'm gonna sound like an old person, but you know, today's games, nobody wants to work for anything in these games. Like back in the day, back in my day, we used to play games and you actually had to play the game to unlock things that were in it. And I want that again. I want to be able to actually feel rewarded for playing the game and not just play it because somebody made a game for me to play. Like I want there to be something to do in it. So hopefully we can get that. If it's more arcadey, then we'll probably have unlockables. If it's not arcadey, we won't as much. But you'll be able to unlock. I think you'll still be able to unlock engines and and color schemes and all that. I just hope it's more advanced than just like, hey, this engine goes faster and this one goes slower and this one turns better. Like I hope it's actual kind of deep customization.
That's where the whole Saboba tease is very like, "Oh, why are you there?" as, like, the final note of the trailer. Like, is this them being like, "We screwed up with Beyond Victory, we have to actually make this work this time?" Who knows, right? Like, that's the crazy thing to think about, like, that they saw the immediate lack of reaction, and VR games have been kinda dead for a minute, but still, the negative only reaction for it, that not even apathy probably was like, "Oh, okay, maybe we kinda wasted Saboba here, we need to actually do something cool with him." So, yeah, I don't know, we'll wait and see. I'm not trying to be a cynic here. I would love it where you have it just be cosmetics online and you actually still unlock everything through the game, or like there's a way that like, through the campaign, once you progress far enough, then it reflects on multiplayer and makes you like engage with both sides of the game. I just yeah, like Liam said, maybe I'm getting old. I just don't see that in games anymore, right? It's an extreme. You'll see people who like play Souls-like games and like have that intricate breakdown of every single detail and all, and then you'll have games that are like half step past a mobile app game, right? We don't have that more of that middle ground that used to exist. So that's what I'll say. But yeah, implementation, like Voss is saying, it makes it so hard. It makes it so hard. But yeah, I want to be optimistic about both games, especially when we have nothing else from Zero Company since that trailer, right? Like this is crazy how much we're getting, but I need to see some gameplay, like proper gameplay, and I need to see why you put a Saboba in here and not have any pod racing for me to get super excited. Right now, I'm excited just because it's gonna be there next year, but I'm starting to feel a little cynical too the more I think about it.
I feel a little more cynical because of the fact there's no pod racers after talking this through with all of you, but I'm still very optimistic and like what we can get as a Star Wars racing game in 2026. Like that's just still taking all of my expectations. And I agree. We need to make unlocks great again. They need to be good. Like Mario Kart World, for all its issues, I love that I had to play the game a lot to unlock things. Like we used to be encouraged to become masters of a game in order to unlock things versus nowadays when you have games outside of the difficult games that you have to really grind to improve to get to the next level. Um, a lot of games, it's like you get things just in the midst of the story. Then if you want to do the extras, you get some cool unlockables. And I love modern games, but something like this would just be awesome if it was a throwback to 2000s games where you played the story on easy, played the story on hard, played it on expert, and then continued to unlock things. You have to beat certain time trials, you have to beat certain things. You have to pretty much play every aspect of the game in order to unlock everything. And then at the end, you get a big reward, not just a digital platinum trophy. Um, I love platinums. I try to go for platinums, but I would be a lot more satisfied if at the end of the game you unlock Darth Vader than unlocking a platinum trophy. Um, that would be cool. And I'm also interested to see if there are any other ways to do things that are inspired by Star Wars. Like another part of this game, the way the not to go too much longer on this specific game, but the way the voiceover was was done, it really kind of reminded me of the Star Wars, what was that game called? It's like the Underground or something. It was a Sega Dreamcast game where you basically had Jabba the Hutt. He had a fighting pit, and you played as all these different characters and took on different vehicles. Was it Star Wars Unleashed? Star Wars something like that, Battlegrounds? You guys remind me in the comments, but it was a cool game. It was fun, and it was, kind of an homage to everything Star Wars. It would be cool if there were some of those elements, like you had the Darth Vader themed speeder, and it had some abilities that were a little bit more aligned with his character, the Boba Fett themed speeder, stuff like that. And it gave you different abilities that were a little bit more tied to them, or like the Han Solo one, it made you a little more lucky in the races, stuff like that. It would be cool if it was inspired by all the different things in the franchise rather than just being like, random new character X who gets mentored by Sebulba and becomes, a racing legend in a period of Star Wars that nobody's ever heard of. Like, great, but that'll make it a little more forgettable. But yeah, we've now talked for a long time about this stuff, so we're gonna wrap it up here pretty soon. But again, any last questions on the games? I'm sorry, uh, Badasai, we might have to wait on your AI question for Tuesday's stream, just because it is a big thing to talk about, and we do have to wrap up our stream here pretty soon. And then Brandon asks, speaking of Game Awards, did you see Street Fighter movie drop today as well? I did not get to watch the trailer, but hoping it's better than the last few Street Fighter live action movies. That has a lot lower bar to clear than the Mortal Kombat movies did, the newer Mortal Kombat movies. Because the old one, it's not very good, but it at least has a lot of fans. Street Fighter, nobody unironically likes Street Fighter. I've seen the original. It's hilarious, but it's not good.
Yeah, yeah, I have no expectations for it, and everybody I've seen cast have either been spot on or absolutely awful castings. There's no in between, so I'm gonna look at the trailer later and then probably ignore it until it comes out.
Jesus says, random question. Do you think they'll ever tie in Kingdom Hearts or even Final Fantasy art thing? MTG now, Spider Man. Um, I'm confused what you're asking. In a video game, will Kingdom Hearts have Star Wars just because it's a Disney property? Like, well, Magic the Gathering is a card game, so you're talking about Star Wars. I assume you're talking about video games, right? Not the cards. So, no, I don't think so. Just Kingdom Hearts seems pretty much over. 3 didn't go over that well. I wouldn't be shocked at a reboot one day, but I just think that series specifically is more special to be purely Disney rather than Star Wars or Marvel involved. So I don't think so. But I'm okay with the crossover stuff. Like, we need to have fun again with some things in Star Wars. Like, everything's taken so seriously. Sometimes it's fun to just have a game where all the characters are fighting each other, or you just have the best of. Like, we used to get too many of those because they were cheap and easy to make. Nowadays, every game's so expensive, nobody wants to make something that's just kind of fun and dumb. But it would be nice to have some of those back in the Star Wars world, and that's where we can get our free to play freemium games.
Yeah, I don't know if we live in a world where Star Wars commits to, like, micro gaming and how low budget those are for, like, something to happen like that. I think that's probably the best landscape for it to happen these days, unfortunately. Like you said, AAA is just so serious. You have to have a huge string of success to take a gamble like that now, and I mean, the only, like, distributors that I could see, like, pull something off like that would be Nintendo, and there's just no way you see a Nintendo Star Wars, like, mashup of that caliber after, you know, Disney basically tried to do the same thing as old Amiibo stuff with Disney Infinity and then cancel that on their own. So, I think that's kinda where the fun kinda ended for Disney and Star Wars. It became a bit more serious after that. Plus, because it's like it's not necessarily the best look when your fun stuff is doing pretty well and maybe generating some money, and then all your serious stuff is flopping like a lot of EA Star Wars did very early on. So maybe it's a little reactionary right now, but I think in a little bit, if these games in 2026 and on are actually good and actually come out and are well received, and we build off of this momentum since 2024, that's slow but not negative for once. Yeah, then I think we could see something like that.
Well, I'm glad you're enjoying the book coverage too, Hood Bonker. Hopefully you check out some of our other stuff. We just posted our top books of the year. We stream. We have a video coming out summarizing that, like a clipped video. Um, so yeah, we are doing a lot of book coverage. So if you guys enjoy that, check that all out as well. Well, I think we're going to have to wrap up tonight, barring any last questions. Thank you guys so much. And again, we'll be back on Tuesdays, every Tuesday, regardless of news. We do live streams. So if you're somebody who is interested in talking with us, enjoyed the conversation tonight, pretty much just like this, except you can ask anything you want. So join us on Tuesdays and send in your questions. Glad we were able to respond in the way that worked best, Jesus. Um, Hopefully we got the gist of what you were asking. But yeah, make sure you join us again next week. Like the stream if you haven't. Again, a lot more people watching than have liked the stream, so make sure you do so. Subscribe for more content like this. Again, live every Tuesday. We also have videos coming out every week. We have shorts twice a week every week. We do these community polls twice a day, every day. So if you're interested in voting in those, favorite Star Wars movies, TV, favorite characters, power rankings, all that type of stuff, check those out as well. Thanks so much for watching, everybody, and we will see you all next week.